because this is kind of like a step in time of history. It used to be, at least as far back as 2011, that if you wanted to buy helium, if you're having a huge birthday party for the SES and you wanted helium, you have to get helium from a qualified list, a federal helium supplier that's been approved by the Bureau of Land Management.
So if you wanted some helium to like pass around the office so everyone could have funny voices. Yeah. If you wanted to have a whole day of just talking really high, yeah. And you're like, well, let's get helium. Great. I've got a government purchase card. Everything seems to be lining up perfectly. Wait a second. Bureau of Land Management. We've got to go with a qualified federal helium supplier. Maybe that's not in effect anymore. Not anymore. Okay. Now you can just go anywhere.
So we're actually going to start with a user question. The old dad. Ye old dad.
Ye old dad?
The old dad.
Ah.
Maybe you could change his username because that would be funny.
I like ye old dad.
All right. He asked about something. I know we've kind of talked about it. I think we've talked about it before. He said, I'd love to see a video on FAR Part 8, mandatory sources.
Mandatory sources.
Tell me about mandatory sources.
Mandatory sources. So, yeah, we talked about this in a video where if you have to buy something, you can't just go out to the market. So they call it like the open market is when you go out, come one, come all, full and open competition. Then any company can come and then submit their proposal, submit their bids. There is a part of the FAR in Part 8 that tells you there are some sources you have to check first. You can't just immediately go out to the open market. You gotta check these sources first, and there's a list of them in Part 8. We can also talk about this in this video. So Part 8 also covers GSA. So
GSA is
General Services Administration. So they're the agency that does a lot of buying supplies and services for other agencies. So each agency has their contract office, but GSA also sets up these supply schedules. We talked in one.
Is that a multiple award schedule?
That's right. A mass.
Okay, yeah. Okay, I remember that.
You know how I remember that?
How?
I'm learning. I told you I'm learning Espanol.
Espanol.
If you want more, you go MAS.
You go MAS.
MAS, multiple award schedule.
So the GSA like buys, like they know the government as a whole is going to need a bunch of this one thing, so they'll like buy a bunch of it, and the government can come and get it from them.
Yeah, and we can look at it. We can bust into Part 8. There's GSA sets up these federal supply schedules, FSS, multiple award schedules, really to help streamline the ordering process for agencies.
Sort of like the Amazon?
Yeah, they're like kind of like the Amazon. They got the government Amazon, GSA. Yeah, so.
Do they deliver same day?
No. And you don't order it in the same speed that you do on Amazon Prime. But there's pros and cons to going with federal supply schedules. So, for example, when I was a contracting officer with the Department of Defense, we had our own contract vehicles. We had our own contract office. I didn't do a lot of things using GSA, but I also did a lot of things using GSA. And the office are like, let's go GSA with this. Let's do GSA. And that really meant. I can talk about this in a minute because GSA offers a lot of things. But when they say let's go GSA, I think they're really talking about let's contract using GSA according to Part 8.
Okay. So
Part 8 includes a list of all the stuff you have to consider first before you buy anything. And one of those things is that you should consider is GSA.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is that top of the list?
No. So GSA. So actually, you want to break this open? We got our 2011
Bluey's back.
Bluey's back. 2011 FAR.
We love old Bluey.
We do. And old Blue is a little outdated this time. I cheated a little bit. I checked some things in the new FAR, like online so for one example is my 2011 FAR had a whole subpart on the acquisition of helium, because this is kind of like a step in time of history. It used to be, at least as far back as 2011, that if you wanted to buy helium, if you're having a huge birthday party for the SES and you wanted helium, you have to get helium from a qualified list, a federal helium supplier that's been approved by the Bureau of Land Management.
So if you wanted some helium to like pass around the office so everyone could have funny voices. Yeah. If you wanted to have a whole day of just talking really high. Yeah. And you're like, well, let's get helium. Great. I've got a government purchase card. Everything seems to be lining up perfectly. Wait a second. Bureau of Land Management. We've got to go with a qualified federal helium supplier. Maybe that's not in effect anymore. Not anymore. Okay. Now you can just go anywhere.
All right, we spent so much time on a subpart of the FAR that doesn't exist. Let's talk about the other parts of Part 8. So
so we're talking about GSA is not the first place you go.
Yeah, GSA is not the first place you go. So when contracting professionals go to Part 8, Part 8's used a lot. Okay. And one of the reasons why it's used a lot is it is its own ordering procedure. It has its own ordering procedure, its own processes for using GSA. So there's a whole Subpart 8.4 is ordering from GSA. And that's why people use Part 8 a lot, because it's you don't use Part 13 or Part 16, some of these other parts. If you're going GSA, Federal Supply Schedules, you're going to be cracking open Part 8. It's got all these things you got to do. However, the other parts of Part 8 are important too, and that's where it's talking about mandatory sources. Okay. And GSA is not a mandatory source.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it is you'll see, we'll go through the list of you have to, okay. And then it says the contracting office is encouraged to use GSA, Federal Supply Schedules, but you never have to use GSA, and that's a good thing, because I'll explain that in a minute. So subpart so 8.002 talks about priorities for and I don't know, maybe this is just my experience. I don't know. I don't think it is. I have a feeling it's not. I don't think this is used maybe properly or as much as it should. I think a lot of contracting professionals don't realize their requirements to check certain things before they go. We tend to just go full and open really quickly. Okay. In a market research report, when you're documenting the research you did to come up with your acquisition strategy, there's usually a section in that report that talks about, did you check these things? Did you check your mandatory sources? And I think maybe they're kind of fly through those, but here they are. All right, so except as required by 8.002. Okay, here's the list. It's broken up in supplies and services. A little different for supplies and services. And the very first thing, which seems common sense, is agency inventories, which means check your house. So I used to do a training on this when I was in the government, and there were a couple of these sources that just check your house first. If you need to charge your cell phone, you realize your cell phone needs to be charged, you don't immediately go out to Walmart and buy a charger or go on Amazon. You check your house. You look in your drawers and look for the charger that you had. That's exactly what Part 8 is saying. So instead, and actually for all of these, let's just use a desk. Okay. So you're in a government office, and you need to buy, you're setting up a little team, and you need to buy like 5 desks. Let's say 5 desks. And so before you go out and buy the desks or look on even GSA, you have to go within your own agency and see if there's excess desks available in some office somewhere. We talked about in the first video how there's a reason why government offices look so shoddy.
Yeah.
looks so bad? Well, it's probably because they're following the rules. You know, they're not going out and spending taxpayer dollars on a super nice desk. They're calling up their agency quartermaster, whatever, the inventory, and saying, I need 5 desks before I go out and purchase this. Do you have any extra? So that's what that is.
Okay.
Agency inventories. For the Defense Department, our agency inventory was DLA, Defense Logistics Agency, I think, had theirs. Yeah. So I would think for the. So I worked at a couple places in the government in the Department of Defense. Yeah. Before going to DLA, and if I were looking for a desk, I'd probably call someone in my office and say, I'm looking for a desk. Can we get a desk? You know? So, but then you check agency inventories. And then the second thing, so that's the very first thing. So check your house. And when I use this as training, the house is the federal government. So not just DOD, not just, it's your agency, it's the federal government. So checking agency inventories first is almost like checking your room. Check the room you're in first. Okay. That's your agency. Check the room you're in. Okay, no desks, or you want a special kind of desk. All right, then check other rooms in the house. Okay. And that's access from other agencies. So that's like inventories from, that would be, actually, Subpart 8.1 talks about a GSA. It's called GSA Access. And Subpart 8.1, they have a whole website where you can check. It's just extra stuff, like extra supplies, excess supplies. Instead of buying more stuff, go and see what GSA has extra of. Okay. What's that commercial where it's like, I just got an Xbox for $20. Oh yeah. I just got, what is it? It's not Overstock. Yeah. It's anyway, it's like that, right? They have a ton of stuff. And so check that first.
So is that the GSA's stuff, or do they collect surplus from all the agencies?
Let's see, Subpart 8.1. I think it's just their stuff. Okay. Let's see. When practicable, agencies must use excess personal property as the first source of supply. And by the way, we're just talking about supplies still. It's going to go to services later. Okay. So we're just talking about supplies. Let's see. Then it talks about GSA. Review of excess personal property catalogs and bulletins issued by the General Services Administration, GSA. So they have their own, and it's called GSA X. No E. They take the E out because that's really cool. They're like GSA X. And then CESS, CESS.
All right.
This is funny, though, because the brand new version has that, and they don't have GSA Access anymore. So they made their own. It's now part of a website called the Personal Property System. They consolidated.
Why is it called personal? Does it belong to?
Maybe it belongs to us, the government, right? We're still checking things that technically that belong to us, maybe. Right?
It belongs to the government, not to a person.
Belongs to, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's a weird word.
It is personal property.
Yeah.
Sounds like, yeah. So, yeah. So the very, very top of any mandatory source list is going to be, we're going to talk about AbilityOne, federal prisons, some of these that are meeting a socioeconomic like policy. Mm-hmm. Before any of that, though, what takes the very, very top is, do you have it? Like I know you need it. Do we have it? like don't go get something if you have.
I'm guessing sometimes. So I do a lot of like handyman work around my house. I like to do handy stuff.
Yeah.
And I don't know how many times I've needed a certain size screw or whatever.
Yeah.
And I know it's somewhere in my garage.
Yeah.
But it's going to take me an hour and a half to find it.
Mm-hmm.
Or I can just run down to Home Depot and buy it for $1.50 and be good to go. So yes, I have it. And in a sense, it's wasteful to not use what I already have. But in a bigger sense, it's wasteful to spend an hour and a half finding one screw when I can just go get it for cheap.
That's a good point. But case in point, it gives you a website in the new FAR of going to GSA Access that does not exist. I tried 5 times recently to go to there.
Okay.
And so I had to actually do a little bit of research to find out where the new GSA Access stock site was.
So you found it though?
I found it, but then I couldn't be. You have to be a government person to get in. So the government people will be able to keep searching. But yeah, that's the other thing too, is you got to check your house. But how bureaucratic and labor intensive is it going to be for the DoD to contact DLA to get the paperwork, to get those desks that we already have, versus just doing an order?
So someone who needs to buy
spending
something, they could probably get away with saying the same thing. Like, yeah, we might have it, but we're not going to spend 6 months looking for it. We're going to go buy it. Is that a justification?
I don't think so.
No?
I think you have to, agencies shall satisfy. We're going to look at something else where it says you should consider. There's a difference between consider and satisfy. So that's important for contract professionals. If it says consider, that gives you a little bit more flexibility to look into it.
Yeah.
And then they're like, this is going to take a long time. You're like, all right, well, I considered it. And you document that you considered it. This says you shall satisfy. So I think you probably need to come up with a better reason than that.
Or you can look for a little bit and say, like, I tried.
And that's what I did. So when I worked for the agency I worked for, where I did this the most, and I read Part 8, and I may have been the only one in my office that was really trying to do this. Everyone else was just going straight to GSA. Yeah, and you get punished for being a nerd, because it was so hard for me, to your point, to like find out what's the DLA inventory. And the reason why it made so much sense for me, we'll get into services in a minute, but I was ordering office furniture and school supplies and other stuff. So I was able to really, I've got some stories I can tell about Unicore, AbilityOne, because I did all those things. But I tried first checking my house. I tried to practice what I preached, and I never did. I never found, there was always some reason where they told me no, or they asked me what kind of desk I'm looking for. And you'll see somewhere later, especially with FPI, you've got to, it's got to meet what you need in terms of quality delivery, and delivery is one of them. So if they can't get you the desk where you could do a quick RFQ and do a GSA order and get the desk in 2 months, you checked your source, not available. Not available means it won't meet your need.
Okay.
Yeah. So agency inventories, access from other agencies, including GSA. And then the third thing down the list for supplies is federal prison industries. And federal prison industries.
That's the FPI you just said?
FPI.
Okay.
That is in Subpart 8.7. And that is, we talked about that, and I think one of the first ones we did here. But 8.7, no, I'm sorry, it's 8.6. It says, before purchasing any item of supply, to determine whether FPI item is comparable to supplies available. Sorry, hold on. I don't want to do that yet. Okay, I'll go to this. 8.601. Federal Prison Industries, FPI, also referred to as Unicore, which sounds pretty cool. Unicore. It's like a unicorn, sort of.
An N on the end of that.
Yeah, I know. Unicorn. It seems like they could come up with an N. Is a self-supporting, wholly owned government corporation of the District of Columbia. And they provide, I'm just reading this from the FAR, it provides training and employment for prisoners in federal, penal, and correctional institutions through the sale of supplies that they make. So it's almost like a rehabilitation program for prisoners. Okay. They make things for supplies.
Cheap labor, probably, huh?
Yeah. And it gives the prisoners kind of something to do as part of the rehabilitation. They're making this furniture. They're making whatever. I think there's other things too that they can make. Yeah. So this is supplies. When it comes to FPI, they're at the top of the list after checking your house. When it comes to services, they're still on the list, but they're more toward the bottom because it's a little harder for you know.
Yeah.
Maybe you don't want prisoners to babysit your kids.
Guy. Yeah.
Yeah. Maybe. And there's obviously a little bit of limitations with federal prisoners doing services. Although if you need some accounting services like a CPA, get Tim Robbins from Shawshank Redemption.
Exactly.
Other than those exceptions, it's going to be supplies for prisoners.
So I remember in the old cartoons, when somebody would get sent to jail, they would tie them to a ball and have them breaking rocks.
That's services. Yeah, that's true.
Services, yeah.
So if you need,
now they have them making desks.
Yeah, if you need, if you're an agency that needs some rocks broken up, it's like before you go to GSA, contact that chain gang.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
But so that's why for services, FPI is lower, but it's above for supplies. It's above AbilityOne, which we'll get to in a minute. But the important thing for this is what I came into. So I looked at the Unicore website. It's not, at least at the time, it wasn't too intuitive. It wasn't as easy to kind of look through, but you have to make sure when you do your research that the FPI item is comparable. Here's the wording. It's an 8.602. So for contracting people, if it's not comparable to meeting the government need in terms of price, quality, and time of delivery, it's a no-go. Then you move on.
Okay.
So you don't want to be too restrictive and say, well, I got to have a oak mahogany desk. It's got to be here tomorrow. It's got to be the cheapest price possible. You got to be reasonable. But it was very rare that I found furniture that met the need that my customer needed as a contract professional. So, but you got to check there first. That's
is there like something that FPIs, are they known for like certain products? Pretty wide gamut of things they offer.
Let's actually look.
Okay.
I think this would be good for viewers. Furniture is the thing that I think of the most.
Okay.
But okay, let's see. Unicore supplies. This is how easy it is Unicore online store products. Boom. It's under unicore.gov, and it is
nice hoodie.
It's got apparel and accessories, awards and plaques.
All right.
If you have an awards ceremony, don't order it from GSA. You have to check if the federal prisoners can make it, you got to go with them first.
Okay.
It's a cool rehabilitation, a bath, shower, and hygiene supplies.
Okay.
Electronics, eyewear, correctional. I mean, this is all, they have pictures of this too. It's a website that looks like it was made in 1995, but it's pretty. This is easy to office furniture. There's a lot of like embroidery, like logos and stuff.
Okay.
Office seating. Oh, printed paper products, calendars. Oh, is the calendar made by? This is a standard government calendar. Maybe we can do a screenshot of it.
Yeah.
And that may be made by Unicore. So
they got a lot of stuff on there.
A lot of stuff. So it's really that easy for contracting professionals. Just go to unicore.gov and just do a quick check. This is for supplies. For services, it's different.
Okay.
Actually, let me just add a curiosity. Look up Unicore supplies.
Services.
Well, you're right. Let's see. Services. See if they have a Unicore services and unicore.gov. Call center services. Warehousing and logistics services, laundry services, electronics kitting, printing and bindery services, training range solutions. So there are services here. Okay. That's further down the list, though. So we'll go to that in a minute. But yeah, that's Unicore. You just got to do a quick research.
That seemed pretty easy for.
It seemed pretty easy, yeah. And then once you find something, then you can pick up the phone and call and say, "This is what I'm looking for." And then because you still you don't want to force with anything in the FAR, including small business set asides or whatever. You don't want to force something at the expense of your customer. Okay. There are so many ways to not get out of it, but just say you considered it. It's not going to meet your customer's needs in terms of quality delivery, and move on. Document that you checked. The last thing,
your customer is the end user in the government, right?
The person who has the requirement. Yeah.
Okay.
It's a balance, though. I mean, I was a little too zealous, I think, with trying to do all these sources, and I try to force it when it didn't maybe need to be forced. I try to or we're low on service disabled veteran-owned small businesses. Let me just do a set aside. And I got a little smarter as I matured in my career to say, first and foremost, let me focus on what the customer needs, the requirement owner needs, and then we'll see. We're going to prioritize considering these other sources, but we'll see. The other thing you don't want to do on the other end of the spectrum, though, is the requirement owner is most likely not going to want to do any of those things. They're going to want to go straight to someone they have in mind, or so you have to consider them seriously. You can't just say to the customer, well, let's just make the desk mahogany and no one's going to be able to. So you got to balance. It's got to be a balance. Yeah. You got to say, let's be reasonable. Come on. Do you really need that kind of desk? Okay. All right. So, let's see. Okay. Okay. So agency inventories, excess from agencies, federal prison industries. What do you think the next one is? Can you take a guess?
You said AbilityOne.
AbilityOne, that's it.
AbilityOne?
AbilityOne. AbilityOne's from the Javits-Wagner-O'Day Act or something. I probably got that wrong. We'll check it.
We'll check it.
We'll check. It's procurement by the Committee for Purchase from People Who Are Blind or Severely Disabled. All right. What did I say? Javits-Wagner O'Day Act.
I think that's what you said. You might have got them mixed up in order, but I think you said them all.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Let's see what year it is. Let's see. Hold on. I want to see what year.
What was your guess?
Oh, man.
Before you look it up.
I'm going to be way off.
I'm going to go 83.
It's got to be later in the years, right? I'm going to say Javits-Wagner O'Day. I'm going to say 76.
All right.
Was passed in 1971 as a significant amendment to a prior act in 1938. Okay. So good. The government has always put some kind of priority for our disabled Americans. Really cool. This is one of my favorite. I think we mentioned this before. This and I think HubZone are two of my favorite sort of initiatives the government has. This gives disabled Americans, blind and severely disabled Americans, the opportunity to work in jobs that would otherwise be difficult in corporations. AbilityOne works through something called Central Profit Agencies, which is the National Industries for the Blind, NIB, and NISH is National Industry for, I think that's severely handicapped.
I think it is.
They didn't spell it out though, because I think it's just not a term we use anymore. But sometimes they say NIBNISH. NIBNISH. Here's an important thing though. I learned this the hard way. If you're doing AbilityOne, so AbilityOne is a program that helps severely disabled and blind Americans get jobs. A lot of services, but there can also be supplies too, I think. But it's more of services. If FPI, this prison, is more on the supply side, AbilityOne's more on the service side. And you see that the priorities flip. So when you're prioritizing what to look first for supplies, you go to the prisons. When you prioritize what to look for services, you go to AbilityOne.
Okay.
And I think we talked about this before. That's why you see in government offices, you will see a lot of workers doing like janitorial services, and they will have some kind of physical or mental disability. Okay. And they'll have the AbilityOne name tag. They're just very common in government offices. But the companies do other things. They can do records. They can transfer records. They can do contract closeouts. AbilityOne. A lot of contract offices don't know that. If you have the funding and you don't want to do closeouts because they're a pain, just give it to AbilityOne and they'll do it for you. It's pretty cool.
All right.
Here's the thing to remember though. AbilityOne is not the NIB niche is not the government. And when you look them up and try to talk, so you contract through them, and they kind of, this is just a little maybe a tip, because I did this a lot, and there were some contracts I did that didn't work out so well with AbilityOne. If you contact NIB, they'll have the appearance that they work for the government, but they don't. And they're actually going to not necessarily represent your interests in the government. There's a number here in the FAR, because I was so frustrated. There was one, one example was snow removal services was on the procurement list. I'll talk about that in a minute. And I wanted to, I didn't want to use AbilityOne because their prices were insane. And it was way higher than market prices. Like, I just can't justify this. We can't spend this money. I kept calling them and they gave me a different answer. Finally, I called this number that's in the FAR.
A phone number in the FAR?
Yeah, it's a phone number in the FAR. And
Right.
it was this one actually in this FAR.
Okay.
It's still, I think the number's still there, but it is, let me see if I can find it real quick. We're going to have to cut a lot of this stuff out. Okay, here it is. Under the procurement list. The procurement list is if there's any it's a big list of services. If there's anything that you need is on that list, you have to use AbilityOne. So if I have snow removal services, if snow removal services show up on that list, I got to use them. So this number here is in 8.703. It's in Arlington, Virginia. It is called not NIB, but the Committee for Purchase from People Who Are Blind or Severely Disabled. The number is right here, 703-603-7740. That's the number you call because that's the government. And I called them and I was like, I've got this problem. They said, yeah. And then I could tell already that they were on my side and they weren't just trying to get the business. You got to be careful with AbilityOne. It's a great initiative, but you also don't want to be raked over the coals no matter how great the initiative is.
And can you skip them if it's too expensive?
You can ask for a waiver. So it's a couple things that people don't know about with the procurement list and AbilityOne. One is that procurement list has not only the type of service it is, but it'll have the location. And I had groundskeeping services in Fort Bragg that I had to do one time. Now it's Fort Liberty. So I had to do groundskeeping in Fort Liberty. I thought I needed to go to AbilityOne, but then I did a little bit more research and I looked at the location did not include the Fort Bragg area. So it wasn't on the list. So you got to make sure on the list means it's the not only the type of service, but the area where it is. So anyway, I had to ask for a waiver. You can ask for a waiver. So when you ask for
based on price,
it can be. So here,
yours was based on price.
Mine was based on price.
Okay.
Yeah, mine was. If you look at, there's purchase exceptions in 8.706, and one is that the AbilityOne participating nonprofit agencies cannot provide the supply, even if they're on the list. This is all stuff that's on the list. You got to use them. You can ask for a waiver or get an exception. And the central nonprofit agency has to grant the exception. And again, that's the agency that is not necessarily the government. They are here. They're defined here in 8.701 definitions. They've been designated to represent the people, not the government. They're representing the people who are blind. So that's really important that you're making sure you're calling the right people. But it's okay. So, and they're going to be the ones granting the exception. So if you have any issue with that, negotiations can be hard too. It's hard to negotiate AbilityOne. Just pick up that number and pick up the phone and call that number that is in the FAR. Those are the government people. So
that's a fun job, fighting with blind people over whether they should get a job.
Yeah, I know. It makes you that's why it's such a sensitive thing. Yeah. But really, it's like, here's the reasons why you should. Again, as good of an initiative as AbilityOne is, don't do something that's bad for the requirement owner. Like, don't force something when it shouldn't be forced. So if the AbilityOne participating nonprofit agency cannot provide the supplies or services within the time required, and commercial sources can provide them significantly sooner, the word significantly sooner, and this was mine, and I actually had this circled. This is probably back from 2012 or something. I had this circled because I had to do this. I had to ask for this exception. The quantity required cannot be produced or provided economically.
Okay.
That's all it says, economically. So I had to.
That's a price.
Yeah, and in my case, it was pest control. It wasn't. It was pest control.
Okay.
I think it was pest control at Fort Benning, Georgia, or something, and they were way over. I mean, it was astronomical, the difference of their prices with the local pest control providers in that area in Georgia. I just couldn't do it. So that's why I started going down that path. And you can, contracting people, you can go down that path instead of paying that money. You need to pursue the exceptions. It's not just because it's not on the just because it's on the procurement list doesn't mean you have to do that if the customer is going to lose out, or the taxpayer in my case.
Totally.
All right, so that's AbilityOne. There's a couple other things here. Hold on. Oh, here's another one. So you can ask for a waiver or an exception. You can also ask that something be added to the procurement list. And I had that experience too. I think it was, I think this one was snow removal. They called me because I knew them by that point because I had checked with them so much. Sometimes I'd look at the list or sometimes I'd call the people in the Nibnish. And I checked with snow removal. I was like, do you guys do this? Because I say all this, I talk about purchase exceptions. I can't. Most of the time, it was a very good process. I used them quite a bit, and it was great. So I wanted snow removal, if the prices were right and they could do the job, I wanted snow removal to be on the procurement list. But he actually brought that up. He's like, no, but we can allocate that service. We can do allocation. And if we go through a process, we can actually add this to the procurement list. Do you want to do that? And my first question, of course, as any contracting person's like, how long is that going to take? We need this. It was a snow removal, right? So it's like, all right, well, we got to do this before the first snow falls in wherever I was. So we did, I think. I went through the process with them. It was very, at least my experience was it was very painless. They added it to the list, and then I used them, and it was good. They did a good job. So many cool things. Check the procurement list, contracting people, because there's a lot of good stuff there. It's sole source, right? It is required by statute according to FAR 6.303-5. Let's check 303-5.
All right.
I don't know if that's right. 303-5 is required by statute. So you're fine. You don't need to write, I don't think, a J&A or anything. You can go straight to that company. There's so many advantages to going. All right. So all right.
What's next on our priorities?
Yeah, it's a monster deep dive, isn't it?
It is. I like it, though.
Okay, good. Yeah. The next is there is a difference between GSA access, which is access from other agencies it's getting, and then this idea of wholesale supply sources in stock programs that GSA, that's called GSA Global Supply. That is not the same thing as a GSA Federal Supply Schedule.
Okay.
And that's what I think there's a lot of confusion about GSA. I think the contracting offices need to know what everything GSA does and the differences. GSA is all over the place. So we can even put the bullets from top to bottom of everything GSA does, maybe.
Okay.
So first, GSA offers supplies for check your house type supplies. That's GSA excess.
Like surplus stuff.
Okay. We got extra stuff. Then GSA offers something for wholesale supply sources, just stock programs that is just, I don't know, it's like inventory of a whole bunch of stuff. That's different from excess, but that's also different from their federal supply schedules.
Okay, so that's more like the GSA knows that the government's going to need probably about 10 million pencils this year, so they just buy 10 million pencils.
Yeah, I think that maybe it's a source that's already there, like a stock program.
Okay.
But it's not federal supply schedule. So then right under that are federal supply schedules of GSA, and that's Subpart 8.4. That's what most people talk about when they talk about GSA. So you got GSA Excess, GSA Global Supply, GSA Federal Supply Schedules, and then you have GSA Multiple Award Contracts. Not MASS, but MAC.
Return of the Mac.
Return of the Mac. And MAC is not Part 8. So they're using large multiple award contracts according to like Part 16 of the FAR, like IDIQs. Those aren't FSSs. And examples of huge GSA created MACs are Oasis and Alliant is one for IT services, professional services. But Oasis is a huge one. Oasis is, I don't know what the acronym stands for. I'm sure that it's an acronym, but it's professional services.
That's an IDIQ?
It's IDIQ. It's not a federal supply schedule.
Indefinite delivery, indefinite quantity?
That's right. Yeah. So, and
not so dumb anymore.
Not so dumb. Yeah. These are going to be less interesting when you're as you're getting more.
We'll just find someone else to be the dummy, and then I'll be the.
Well, it'd be cool if eventually I start asking you questions, like the student becomes the master.
Me.
Yeah. Or I start talking, you're like, actually, that's not correct, Will.
Never gonna happen. Don't worry about it.
I don't know if you want that to happen.
I don't think I want that to happen.
So it says in here, when it talks about federal supply schedules in 8.4, that a federal supply schedule is legally and technically an indefinite delivery contract.
Okay.
But it's not an indefinite delivery contract per Part 16. It's its own thing. So that's GSA. It's got GSA Access, Global Supply, Federal Supply Schedules, and then the MAX, like Oasis and everything. I don't know if we understand the distinctions with all those all the time, but each one of those is a different ordering process. And only when you're using FSS, that part of GSA, do you ever use 8.4. And I've worked with people at contracting who've made that mistake, and they've gone to a different part of the FAR. GSA, though, when you say GSA, it's very loaded kind of thing. They offer a lot of things. Plus, I think they still administer the Trump Hotel, downtown DC. So they
really,
yeah, GSA handles property as well, government property. Remember that thing when Trump was elected in 2016? There was some controversy over whether or not he could still have that hotel.
Oh yeah. So
he gave it to GSA, took it over or something.
Okay.
Anyway,
interesting.
Yeah. All right, that's all supplies, in a whopping 42 minutes.
All right.
Okay. We're still all on page 1, by the way.
No, so reading the FAR is not as useful as us talking. You got to read more information.
You got to read the FAR, and then you got to live the FAR.
Yeah.
You can read one page, and then you live 10 years of it. So services. Services will be quicker. Very top of the list on services. Obviously, there's no stocks. There's no like check your house with services. Okay. What do you think is at the very top of the list for services? What would you guess?
AbilityOne.
AbilityOne. That's it.
All right.
Number 2. What do you think number 2 is?
I'm
going to check.
GSA.
Let me check, because I think my 2011 is outdated. It'll give you the priorities between AbilityOne and FPI, and it'll say FPI and AbilityOne may produce identical supplies or services. They produce a lot of identical supplies and services. So when this occurs, offices shall purchase in the following priorities. This is 8.603. So for supplies, federal prisons first, AbilityOne second. For services, it's flipped. AbilityOne first, federal prison second.
All right.
So that makes sense.
That does make sense. Good.
All right. So then it does this interesting thing. That's it. That's mandatory. You just got to check those first, but then it says this. There's one more section that says like for public utilities, printing, and leasing motor vehicle. There's other exceptions that you go with them. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. All right. 8.004.
Helium.
It used to be helium. Helium's no more now. Sorry, let me see here. If agency is unable to satisfy the requirements for supplies or service for the mandatory sources, you can go open market, but there is this little thing here. It says agencies are encouraged to consider satisfying requirements from this list. And then here it is. It's basically federal supply schedules, government-wide acquisition contracts, multi-agency contracts, MAX, BPAs. So any existing huge multiple award vehicle. The reason why that's not a mandatory source, and I'm so glad it's not, is because those aren't always the best thing for you. It's not like, but it's the reason why they're encouraged to consider it is because the agency went through the trouble. GSA went through the trouble of creating OASIS, and NASA went through the trouble of creating SOUP. You should consider that to streamline contracting. But so FSS, Federal Supply Schedules in 8.4 is not required. You check everything first, and then you don't have to go to the Federal Supply Schedules at all if you want to buy a desk. You can just go straight to wherever you want to go.
Can you go to Walmart? IKEA? Can you go to IKEA?
You can go to IKEA. You can go to Walmart. If IKEA is registered in SAM, so the contractor, you just have to be a qualified government contractor per Part 9 of the FAR, which is contractor responsibility, I think. Let's see.
So is there any world where a government agency can jump on Amazon and order something that they need?
There may be some exceptions under the micro purchase threshold for you to use your government purchase card. But I think even that, you've got so many things you have to check first that whatever you want to purchase with a GPC on Amazon may be satisfied on GSA, eBuy or something, and which you should consider using them first. And usually they're heavily discounted items. But yeah, I mean, the only other thing is it's Part 9. It talks about contractor qualifications. So if you were to buy a over the SAT, a huge over the simplified acquisition threshold,
from Part 13 or 15?
Part 13 is the simplified. Yeah. Actually, not even under. So if it's over the micro purchase threshold, you wanted to go to IKEA and just purchase furniture. So first, you got to check your mandatory supply first.
Okay.
If that doesn't apply, you don't have to go to GSA. You could, but here's the things that you need to do before walking into an IKEA and buying furniture from IKEA. The company would have to meet the definition of contractor qualifications under Part 9. So they'd have to be registered in SAM.
Okay.
And all that. Then also, if you're under the simplified acquisition threshold, you would need to maximize competition to the maximum extent practicable. So just walking into an IKEA and grabbing furniture, it's showing you're not jonesing to compete, really,
Yeah.
So
okay.
That was asked of me all the time when I was in the government with my requirement owners. A lot of colonels and others would say, can't we just get this on Amazon? And instead of saying no, I try to say, we could, but here's what we'd have to do.
Yeah.
And after going through all of it, they'd be like, all right, just, just use GSA. When they talk about the things that you should consider multiple award vehicles or federal supply schedules, they call this sometimes best-in-class vehicles. So it's like existing best-in-class vehicles. And I think that is a bad name for those vehicles because they are not best in class.
Sounds like a Mercedes.
Best in class. Yeah.
Best in class vehicle.
Best in class. It is not best in class for everything. I got burned by best in class so many times in my career. It is a great way to streamline, but the tendency that the government has, and I'm gonna pick on GSA a little bit because it's just what they do. The tendency for GSA is that they will try to fit a one-size-fits-all solution and try to jam it down your throat and say, if you're going to be ordering cell phones, this was probably a cell phone. GSA made these huge cell phone contracts. Now we've got cloud compute contracts and all these. Like, okay, if you're doing this, they call it their version of category management is for all of this category, come to the best in class and order here. The problem with that is that you're going to be severely limiting who you're purchasing from. It may not be the best terms for you. And one of the places I really got burned by that is in artificial intelligence. So I was working with a contracting, I won't name any names to protect the identity of those involved, but we were working on something that was AI related. And I was working with a contracting office in the DoD and their lawyers, and they were insisting that I use one of their best in class vehicles to purchase from it. It wasn't a federal supply schedule, but it's a huge, ginormous vehicle. But in my opinion, it wasn't ginormous enough. Like it had all of the old, I won't name these names either, but the old beltway standbys,
Okay.
the type of folks that you see when you land in Dulles and the names that pop up on the buildings around Dulles.
Yeah. Right outside the windows, we can see them all right now.
Yeah. But they didn't have the names of the kind of folks that you see when you land in an airplane in San Jose.
Yeah.
And I needed that because I wanted to increase market participation to some of these non-traditional players. And their lawyers were fighting us on that. They said, no, we cannot justify. Our local policy says you have to use our best-in-class vehicle and not go open market unless you come up with a justification. I was like, let's come up with a justification. And we tried, and the lawyers didn't like it, so we didn't do it. We went with this multiple award vehicle, and we awarded to one of the Beltway people. And for the next 3 years, I had to stand in front of the Senate committees, staffers, explaining why in the world we awarded this AI project to this pool of companies instead of going out in the market to obviously AI companies in Silicon Valley and others. Like, why in the world did the government restrict? The reason why is because there was a local policy where they carried on the spirit of Part 8 that said, you got to go best in class. But really what Part 8 says is it encourages you to consider. So it's that rule again with Part 8. Yeah, stuff is mandatory. Yeah, stuff is encouraged. Don't force something if it's not good for the customer.
Okay.
That's my little rant story. I'm still
What was
upset about that.
What was the company?
Should I say the company?
We won't
What?
put it in.
The company we awarded to was. All right, so let's finish this up with talking about the big 8.4 all things GSA federal supply schedules. Want to do that?
Good old GSA.
Good old GSA. So ye old dad.
Ye old dad.
We may be going into way more detail than you wanted, but GSA is great. And so I kind of ragged on GSA a lot because it is not the best solution for so many things. It is not a one size fits all solution. Once you go through the mandatory, your next step isn't to immediately go to a GSA schedule. Having said all that, there are so many times when it's just so easy. And here's the reasons why. In GSA federal supply schedules, this is 8.401. First, it talks about the general. I would encourage anyone who's not as familiar with GSA federal supply schedules to read 8.402 general. It just talks about what this is. It's really informative. Federal Supply Schedule Program is also known as GSA Schedules. Federal Supply Schedule is directed and managed by GSA. And it says, and provides federal agencies with a simplified process for obtaining commercial supplies and services at prices associated with volume buying. So the idea behind the Federal Supply Schedule is GSA is already getting the discount for the government, and competition is done already, and it's going to be done differently when you order it. So Part 6 doesn't apply, Competition and Contracting Act. And also, it's one of the biggest things about GSA. It says in paragraph B of 8.402, the contracts require all scheduled contractors to publish a price list. It's called an authorized federal supply price list. And the most important sentence in this whole paragraph is, the price list contains all supplies and services offered by a scheduled contractor. Maybe that's not the most important one. Hold on. There's a sentence later, I think, that talks about this. But basically, that price list is set in the schedule, and GSA has determined that to be fair and reasonable. You don't have to come up with a fair and reasonable price determination when you order, especially supplies. When you order supplies from Federal Supply Schedule, GSA's done that for you. You're just coming up with your competition.
So it makes your job a lot easier.
Makes your job a lot easier. Yeah. The prices become kind of a thing of, prices become less of a consideration. And actually, when you're coming up with your price determination outside of GSA for other things like open market, they call, you can go into GSA and use their price lists as a justification or rationale for your own cost estimate or to negotiate with someone outside GSA. Like, look, this is the price list on GSA. Okay. Why are you 80% higher or something? Okay. So it's good. GSA does great. That's a great aspect of GSA. The other thing about GSA 8.4 is you can actually create a blanket purchase agreement. So you can create an ordering vehicle from the GSA Federal Supply Schedule. You can create your own little catalog.
Okay.
It can't be an IDIQ. It can't be. It has to be a BPA, blanket purchase agreement. So that's kind of cool. So it says BPAs and orders in 8.404. BPAs and orders placed against a mass using the procedures in this subpart are considered to be issued using full and open competition. So full and open competition is satisfied just by using federal supply schedules.
Because that's the competition's already been done.
Competition, yeah, it's a different kind of animal. They're doing the GSA is handling the competition.
It's like pre-negotiated supplies and services.
Yeah.
Okay.
Big caveat though is they will in 8.4 they put competition procedures on the person who's ordering. So even though they did competition, it's not, you still have to compete. And their competition is more restrictive than Part 13, 8.4. A lot of people don't know that. 8.4 requires you in 8.4 to come up with at least 3 sources or give your reasons why you don't have 3 sources if you're going over the SAT. Okay.
So the GSA is like, so if you needed a desk and you couldn't get it at Federal Prison or AbilityOne or any of that stuff, so you go to GSA.
Yeah.
It's not like GSA is not like the government Amazon. You can't just buy it. You still have to find 3 companies and make a desk and make them compete for the desk that you need.
Yeah, but it is like the government version of, so it's called GSA Advantage.
Okay.
You go into GSA Advantage, and GSA Advantage is the website that's like Amazon. It's got all the different, and also I think GSA Advantage is your gateway into not only the federal supply schedules, but some of these other things that GSA does, like the global supply and all that. And if you want to order, if you see something on GSA Advantage you like and you want to order, then you go into something called eBuy. And eBuy,
it's like eBay.
eBay, yeah. eBuy is the way you order, and I think you have to be a contract officer. You're sending an RFQ out on eBuy. Yeah. But there's exceptions to that. Hold on, I want to check something real quick. So real quick before we get into the ordering procedures, pricing and 8.404D. Supplies offered on the schedule are listed at fixed prices, and it's the price list. That easy. That's kind of cool. Okay. If you're under the micro purchase threshold, you can do whatever you want, or you can just go directly to them. But you're encouraged to. It's like government purchase card rules. If you're under SAT, you have to play. Let's see. Sorry, hold on. We're going to take the thing out. We're going to take the thing out. I think that it's more restrictive because it's not. So if it's under simplified acquisition threshold, this is really big too because this is not followed. I think we follow this in a more restrictive way. 8.405-1, when you're ordering supplies and it's under $250,000, it says consider reasonably available information about the supply or service offered under mass contracts by surveying at least 3 scheduled contractors through the GSA Advantage online shopping service. I love how it says online shopping service. It's like, explaining the internet like it's in the 90s. By reviewing the catalogs or price lists of at least 3 scheduled contractors or by requesting quotations from at least 3 scheduled contractors.
So what's survey? I haven't heard that word yet.
Yeah, that's the surveying the market just means you're looking into, you're going on GSA, you're not talking to anybody, you're just checking 3 companies out.
So you're doing this, you're just looking.
You're doing your market research. Okay. But that is huge because it's or so you're surveying for 3 companies, you're looking at price lists for 3 companies, or you're sending a RFQ out for 3 companies.
Okay.
A lot of local policy rule is, even if it's under SAT, you have to send your RFQ out to at least 3 companies.
You've said local policy a lot. What is local? Is that like
agency policy? Like for example, I got something when I was in the Air Force. We got a memo. I think it may have been a DoD memo in Air Force that said, basically, we have to use best-in-class vehicles before going open market. We've got to use our existing.
So local means like the agency that you're in, not like geographically local, but like
it could be. There could be an office policy that says if they create their own multiple award contract, it says you have to use our.
Okay.
And the sad thing is, the FAR provides a lot of flexibilities. It's like the middle management and offices that make it way more restrictive.
Okay.
But also, local policy could mean the culture. Supervisors will wrongly tell their contracting officers that if they're using GSA, they have to send an RFQ to at least 3 people. That's completely wrong. What it says here, I'm going to do the citation again, just in case a CO needs to use this to argue with their boss. 8.405-1 C1 says that you can, in your market research, just examine 3 companies. And if one is clearly better than the 3, don't do this whole, like, you have 30 days or whatever. Just go directly to that company and get a contract. You can absolutely do that. It says, consider reasonably available information by surveying at least 3, looking at the price lists of each 3.
Is that an and or an or?
Or,
okay.
Or by requesting quotations from at least 3. That's it. So there's 2 other ors than requesting. So, and the reason why that's so important is how much more quickly is it for you to check out 3 price lists, see which one's cheaper, and then just going with the one that's the cheapest. Yeah. That's satisfied. You're satisfying the requirements of 8.4. Remember, this is not full and open competition. The competition requirements are different. That is just way faster, and you're serving your customer better. So don't get way more restrictive than you need to, I guess. There's stuff about brand name. It's a little different for services, though, because services, you've got a work statement attached. So in work statement, you're coming up with your evaluation. So it talks about an 8.405 is probably the most important part of part 8 for a lot of people. 8.405 is all about how to sit your orders out on GSA, Federal Supply Schedules, how to evaluate. You still have to come up with best value, what the best value is, and you can still limit your sources, but it's not using a J&A. Remember, like in part 6, we talked about you got to go full and open, but then if you do other than full and open, you have to create this document called a J&A, a justification and approval. If you're going to do that with Federal Supply Schedules where you're just going to one, it's not called a J&A. Part 6 doesn't apply.
Do you have to do any kind of justification?
Yeah. It's called a limited sources justification. And the way you do it is in 8.405-6, but you got to pay attention to it because there's different reasons for doing a limited sources justification. Remember we talked about in part 6, there's like 7, like industrial mobilization, unusual or urgent and compelling or whatever. And here there's 3 reasons. Okay. And it's got to fit within those reasons. One is urgent and compelling.
Okay.
One is only one source is capable. So that's kind of like the only one. The third one I used quite a bit, and this is different than part 6, is in the interest of economy and efficiency, the new work is a logical follow-on to an original Federal Supply Schedule order. So we call it the logical follow-on kind of exception. You do a limited sources to one company because we're already in the works of a big project, and this just makes sense to go with this person again.
Okay.
You can't modify the contract because maybe it goes beyond the scope. So you've got to do, it's still a new contract with this company. So but it's just a logical follow-on.
Okay.
And I think that's, there's a bunch of stuff in here. So I think 8.405 is just a really important thing to go through if you're ordering from GSA. That's part 8 in a long nutshell, a Brazilian nutshell.
It's a big nutshell.
Yeah. That's it.
I think that's it.
Should we close out with something?
Yeah, we should close out
With a music analogy?
We didn't talk about any music.
Yeah, we didn't. It's hard to talk about music with part 8. If you're, let me think.
Part 8 reminds me of it's like a line dance song.
Line dance song?
Yeah, because it's a song with instructions. Like first you do this.
To the right, to the right, to the right, to the right.
And then you do this.
To the left, to the left, to the left, to the left.
There you go.
And then you spin around and you do this.
Kick, knock, kick, knock, kick, knock, kick.
Keep it shuffle.
It's like the part 8 then is the Cupid shuffle.
Part 8 is the Cupid shuffle.
First, check your house. Then we go to prisons. And check AbilityOne. So you do the line dances, and then it's that part where it says, do whatever you want. But is there like a do whatever you want? But you're encouraged to do the slide. And some people are like, I'm not doing the slide. The slide doesn't make sense. And then you can like pick a partner. Like you're encouraged to pick at least 3 partners.
Yeah.
Before you find your final dance partner, consider 3.
That seems like a good place to end.
All right.
Sweet.
Till next time. Thanks to you, old dad.